The Enlightenment was an 18th century period embracing a new form of thinking, with an emphasis on rationality and the scientific process. Enlightenment thinkers were called philosophs and proposed ideas like men's natural rights, the relationship between ruler and ruled, and they encouraged critical spirit. This reevaluation of the past would catalyze the soon-coming age of revolution. French society in 1789 was divided into 3 estates. The first estate consisted of the clergy, the second estate was made up of the nobility, and the third estate truly was everyone else, from the peasantry to the bourgeois. It is evident to see the imbalance of the population to each estate, and this imbalance created huge issues for the tax situation in France. Not only were the first and second estate the wealthiest and exclusively allowed to participate in government, they were exempt of paying taxes. This disproportionate economic situation led the King of France, Louis XVI, to call a meeting of the 3 estates, with representatives from each. He saw the need to raise taxes to pay back France's enormous debt. This meeting was called the Estates General. Although this seemed like a great idea, conflict quickly arose. The third estate representatives, being the majority of the population, proposed a new idea of voting at the Estates General. They wanted to vote by head, whereas the first and second wanted to vote by estate. When the third estate chose to assemble separately as a national assembly, they were locked out of the Estates General. Refusing to back down, they remained as an assembled group and were committed to write a constitution on their own. This gathering was at an indoor tennis court and came to be known as the Tennis Court Oath. A month later, hundreds of revolutionaries took over the Bastille. It was a symbol of the king's absolute monarchical tyranny. Rioters and additional French military support seized weapons, killed the guards, and beheaded the Marquis de Launay. The capture was known as the storming of the Bastille and represented the end of the Ancien regime. This would be the major violent turning point to start the revolution. As the revolution began, bad hailstorms destroyed grain crops. Bread was scarce and expensive, and women began to gather in marketplaces in Paris to riot, additionally fueled by the rumor that the Queen was hoarding grain. They banded together in a demonstration called the March of the Women, and they went to the Palace of Versailles to make their demands to the king. This was the beginning of the October days, and the king and queen were forced to move out of their lavish palace to live in Paris, thus ending the independent authority of the king. The revolution has been going on for 5 years now, and the people of France have nothing but contempt for the monarchy. Knowing this, the Duke of Brunswick issued an order that threatened to level France should they harm Louis XVI. This upset the French people even more, and his Brunswick Manifesto would then trigger the storming of the Tuileries. 20,000 men and women stormed the Tuileries Palace, where the monarchy had been basically imprisoned since the October days. The crowd effectively suspended the monarchy and put the royal family in prison. A month later, the National Assembly officially abolished the monarchy and declared that day to be day 1, year 1 of the new French Republic. The National Assembly was then divided by 2 groups, the Monards and the Girondins. The king's execution was voted on with a razor-thin majority, and he was guillotined shortly after. To control the growing crisis, the Committee of Public Safety, or the CPS, was formed. Along with the king, the CPS would be responsible for executing 16,000 to 50,000 people in the revolutionary tribunals. It wasn't long until the CPS took over the government. In what was called the Reign of Terror, the CPS had executed over 20,000 victims nationwide. Robespierre, the leader of the CPS, believed that terror was nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, inflexible. On 9 Thermidor, year 2, Robespierre gave a speech to the National Convention declaring them all suspect. Unwilling to suffer under the hands of Robespierre, the National Convention attacked, arrested, and later executed him. The Thermidorian reaction was a gory representation of the saying that the revolution consumes its own children. The Reign of Terror would come to an end in 1794, and from then on the actions of the revolution would have Napoleonic consequences.